I always get so nervous when I'm gonna start shooting. All right, what's up, everyone? I am Betty Dots, and I'm here because I would like to do a little close listening of the Goldlewis Dickinson theme, The Kiss of Death. So this character just came out. I thought it was the first American character in the roster. I suppose Soul is theorized to be American. Chip, which is really funny, is American, but insists he's from Japan, so he's like a little bit of a weeb, right? I mean, Goldlewis Dickinson, if we think like an American character, is the American character. First thing I want to do while we're doing this is that we're going to listen to the whole thing. We're going to point out cool things, you know, but mostly listening. I also want to do a little bit of a close reading, like a music theory, sort of like analysis. I have listened to the song a couple of times, and I noticed a lot of very interesting things that Daisuke is doing to kind of convey sort of like the deal of Goldlewis Dickinson, right? And then just kind of share my like overall thoughts about the song, whether I think it works or I think it doesn't, right? Yeah, I'm very excited. I really like Goldlewis. But for now, I think the best thing that we can do right now, because we're not talking about fighting games, we're talking about music, is listen to the song. Notice I really like the rumbling synth at the beginning. I'm very about it. Notice how it turns into a guitar riff. That motif, that riff that goes throughout the whole song, that's going to be like one of the main things that I'm going to be talking about, right? So like The Kiss of Death, Daisuke Ishiwatari, Goldlewis Dickinson. Let's listen to it. There's that synth, very rumbly. Then the guitar comes in, a little bit of a kick, has this pounding sort of like trucker thing. Pay attention to that. And this groove. Oh man, I love me a slow song. I don't think there's enough slow songs in the soundtrack, and this riff is just great. Just a nice backbeat, very straightforward. And then these three basses. Boom, boom, boom. And of course,
it's not a big deal.
We got the vocals. That bass sounds so aggressive. Alright, so this is like, the verse is very strange. Try to have that quiet part, and it has this more like groovy sort of situation. So we don't have a straight backbeat anymore. We have actually like a sort of form of swing that isn't quite swing. We'll talk about that. Some hits. And then the chorus. The chorus develops on the chords a little bit more. Reinforces the like sort of blues idea, and I'm going to be talking about with this, right? So I think this song, oh man.
The Kiss of Death.
Yeah, this is very good. Such a big fan of this riff, and like I think it just does so much to make it feel American, right? I think that's gonna be like the main topic of conversation here. It's like what Daisuke is doing to create this sort of American theme around Goldlewis Dickinson, right? So now it's not bass hits anymore. The vocals get more intense, and it's not just bass, it's just guitar as well. And then we go back to this sort of like groovy, sort of swingy sort of situation. Yeah, you can hear it in the drums very clearly, that. That sort of like swingy sort of deal that isn't exactly swing. Little countdown to the chorus. It's a short song, which is always great because like it doesn't like really state itself so much. It just does a good job at like keeping itself relevant. Very simple verse chorus structure, although the verse is kind of bizarre, right?
The Kiss of Death.
And now we go to the outro. Yeah. So essentially what happened is that it's sort of double timed, right? Oh man, the solo. Yeah. All pentatonic skill, right? All blues skill, really. So like, think about that. Chord progression has a little bit of a like I don't know, like a blues vamp, like some sort of rock and roll vamp that's going on there. Despite the song being like so metal and this part having such like a thrash metal sort of deal, it's just very bluesy, very rock and roll the whole way, which I believe is intentional, right? And then it also has that sort of swingy sort of feel during that solo section. Yeah, this riff is so good. Nice little turnaround. They switched up the riff there at the end with a little bit of a lead part to it. Reharmonize the chorus at the end. We know that Daisuke loves doing that. Nice. Well, let's talk about the actual music, right? So one thing that I've like kind of been making a big point out of like talking about whenever we were like close listening to the song is its blues influences, right? And like how bluesy it is. And I think that in order to understand how Daisuke achieved a sort of American sound during the song, we got to talk about like what the American sound means. So like for Daisuke to like make this sound American, right? I think he had to like tap into the things that make American music sound American, right? And I mean, if you know anything about like the history of American music, you would know that pretty much all relevant forms of American music, like the whole trajectory of American music, has come from the blues, right? Like the blues is like the initial thing, and the blues, despite setting like thematic ideas and setting up like emotional ideas, it also set up a way of approaching music that became very American over the years, and it bled onto funk, it bled onto rock and roll, it bled onto jazz, right? It just like went into all these things, and then those things developed and it kept going, right? My theory in this sense is that like Daisuke was trying to achieve an American sound by very much tapping into what the blues does without like straight up writing a blues. Because if you straight up write a blues, then maybe you end up with something that's a little bit blander, right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, obviously it sounds American sort of deal. And there's a lot of like obvious little things, but let's talk about the not so obvious stuff. This song is in B major or not, right? And that's part of the conversation about the blues. I have my guitar right here just to kind of show what chords those are. So in the main riff, it's going from B, right, which is like kind of like the center of our key. We're in B major, B minor, B blues. Kind of hard to decide, and I'll show you why right now, right? So what makes things major and minor? What makes things major and minor, and that's both chords and scales. The cliche goes that major stuff sounds happy. It sounds like kind of joyful, kind of hopeful, right? It has that sort of deal. And then minor things are the opposite. They sound a little bit darker, a little bit sadder, a little more dramatic. In reality, major and minor tonalities go beyond that cliche a little bit, and they do different things. But yeah, that's essentially what the cliche is. And the thing that makes in music things be major and minor is the third note of every structure. So in a chord, if the third of that chord, so say for example, I'm playing a C major chord, right? The third would be like the third letter from that C, C, D, E. And that's two whole steps away, right? You don't need to completely understand what's going on there, but essentially C and E are separated by two whole steps, and that's what makes that C major chord be major, right? Now, if that third is a whole step and a half up, so just like 1/2 step less, what we would call a minor third or a flat 3, then that would be a minor sort of structure. So if I grab a C major chord, this note is my E, that's making it a C major chord. But if I grab that E and I make it flat, I end up with a C minor chord, right? Some of y'all might know that already, but I wanted to like establish how important that third is. The third in both scales and chords defines what we call the quality of that musical structure, right? And the quality is whether that thing is major and minor. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, right? Dominant chords are neither major nor minor. Diminished chords are neither major nor minor, despite the thirds that they might have. But that's usually what the rule is gonna like look like. Why is that important? Well, I keep saying that I don't know whether this song is in B major and B minor, even though it is stating a B major chord. I'm pretty sure it's a B major chord, even though they're just playing a power chord, which is neither major nor minor. What they're doing is very interesting, is because they're going to from the B, and they're going two whole steps up to the D sharp. Right, so they're going, and then it goes back to the B, which would be like the 1 chord, right? Like your home, your what key you're in, right? You go back to your 1 chord, and then it goes a whole step and a half up. And if you remember, that was a minor third, right? That's a D natural instead of D sharp. right? So it goes B, B sharp, B, B. And that already sets up like a sort of ambiguous situation. If you're going from the 1 to the major third, the thing that makes it major, and then you're going back to the 1 to the minor third, the thing that makes it minor, at that point it's like kind of hard to tell what key you're in, right? It's hard to tell whether it's major or minor. And the thing about the blues, even though that's not necessarily a blues chord progression, it's referencing one of the like main things that the blues does, which is create a hybridization of major and minor tonality. Throughout like the history of classical music, people say that like, okay, things are in major keys or they're in minor keys, right? And the blues challenged that. The blues had the role of challenging that like notion in music and essentially stating like, okay, what if it's in both, sort of, right? And case in point, the blues in general doesn't really sound major. It doesn't really sound minor. It sounds bluesy, you know? The reason why is because when you're thinking of like a major blues, say I'm playing like a major blues in like A, like a... that sort of deal, right? That's an A major. And that A major chord, or A dominant really, that has a major third, has a major third, right? But the scale that we would play over that is an A minor scale, really an A minor pentatonic, which is the A blues scale, right? So you have this C natural, the minor third, against this C sharp, the major third. I mean, I think what's important to point out there is that in music, playing a minor third over a major chord is a no-no. They always tell you like you cannot do that. It's like the worst sounding thing. But the blues was able to like turn that into like its defining sound, right? There's a lot of theories as to what goes on there and like why that happens, but we're not going to get into those. I just want to like make that statement. Daisuke is directly referencing kind of like the ambiguity that happens in the blues between the major third and the minor third. That's sort of like relationship between those two notes. Those two notes don't get along with each other and shouldn't be in the same place, right? This is a happy note, this is a sad note. You shouldn't have them both in the same place. But the blues has always made a point to put them both in the same place and create a sound that's neither happy nor sad, neither major nor minor, but bluesy. So if you look at the rest of the development, to me that's the most important part of the song, and it's the most interesting part of the song as well. It's just like how Daisuke uses that riff to directly challenge the idea of major third versus minor third and create a bluesy sound, even though he's not playing the chords that you would usually see in a blues. Now, other things that are referencing this sort of like American sound that we like look at in the Kiss of Death, the hits on the bass, stompy kick drum, right? That happens towards the intro and into the verse. That just has a very like backbone sort of deal. And the other element of American music that is very American that nothing else has is swing, right? Like the idea of swing is very bizarre. It's like a complete perversion of rhythm, right? So Americans decided at some point that like eighth notes could be not even, right? So usually when you count eighth notes, let's think like a quarter note is like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eighth notes are when you split those in two, when you end up with like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and if you notice the way that I'm counting that, all of those are kind of like the same distance from each other, right? They're all the same duration. In swing, you grab the 1, 2, 3, 4 and you make those longer, and then you grab the ands and you make those shorter, right? So instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you end up with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hearing that rhythm, you might already be noticing how it happens in the Goldlewis theme. So 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. The verse is kind of swinging, right? So that's like something to like point out, again, another direct reference to like the particularities of like American music. Now looking back, even though this riff isn't swinging, we got that quarter note backbone. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Having a backbeat of only quarter notes is also very referencing of swing, right? Because swing is something that messes with eighth notes. And when you only have quarter notes going on, it's easy to imagine a swing on top of it, even if it's not happening. So case in point, when you think of like swing music of like jazz, you might think of like walking bass. Walking bass is all quarter notes. It's boom, 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 dun, 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 dun. With like the occasional like little eighth note flourish, like a bum, 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 dun, 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 dun. Those quarter notes and swing rhythm are intimately related related because quarter notes are kind of like the foundation of swing. And then on top of those quarter notes, you set up these eighth notes that are like a little offset from each other. Just as a technicality before anyone corrects me, they are technically not swinging in like the verses here because the first note is a little bit too long and the other one's a little bit too short. I think what's happening here is actually like a dotted eighth note followed by a 16th note. It's very close together, like swung eighth notes versus like dotted eighth note plus 16th note. It's pretty close together in like the way that it sounds, but it's technically not swing. So I just want to point that out. Everything's referencing to the same thing. I think that Daisuke did a really good job at like keeping his references in check. The chorus, let's listen to the chorus really quick. Still that kind of swingy deal. And then all of the chords, that's sick how he like tags that vocal right there. That's cool. What's going on there is that they're playing like B, A, E, F sharp, G, A, B. Now that's like minor scale. That's all minor scale. So it kind of states that we're like sort of in a minor context. But again, this song sounds like it's like doing, right? That it's starting with that B major chord, not with a B minor chord. So why is it using only chords from the B minor scale, right? So how is it using the one chord from B major and then a bunch of chords from B minor to finish the chord progression? American music does the same thing, right? Like it's not something that is the blues, but it's something that the blues allow. Not to say that there's not like, you know, borrowing chords from major to like minor modes, but I think that like American music really does attempt to create like a hybrid between a major key and a minor key. And this is a perfect example of that, right? Where you have the one of the major key, B major, then you have the flat 7 of the minor key, A major. And then you have the 5, which is from B major. And then you have the F sharp, the G, and the A, which are all from B minor. Right? It does repeat and it does change in different ways like throughout the song, right? Like it's not always exactly the same chord progression, but they're all doing like very similar things. They're essentially using chords from the pentatonic scale, which like, by the way, the minor pentatonic scale is essentially the same as the blues scale, right? So another reference to the blues. And then doing this like hybrid situation where you have a one chord that is major and then a bunch of chords that accompany that one major chord that are actually from the minor key, that are removed from that one. And I think that when you listen to that, you would never say, okay, this sounds happy, this sounds sad. You would say it sounds bluesy because, again, that like hybrid between major and minor is a very blues sort of thing and a very American sort of thing, you know, by like association. Again, all American music comes from the blues in some sort of way, and it's all very much influenced, even if it's in ways like this. When people say that like all of the American music is like influenced by the blues in some sort of way, they don't necessarily mean that they're doing like a regular like blues chord progression or that like all American music is sad. The blues goes way beyond the like general cliches that people might have about it. The blues is a direct challenge to Western music theory. And like within the system of Western music theory, it says you have a major chord, I'm going to play a minor third on top of that, which is completely messed up. But they do it. And swing is also a direct challenge to Western music system because they said, okay, well, eighth notes are supposed to all be the same duration, but I just arbitrarily decided that 1, 2, 3, 4 are longer and all the ends are shorter. And now we're playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And why? Well, because it's funky and it's groovy and I like to dance, right? Like there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just like what ended up happening. There is a little bit of a rhyme or reason. Scott Joplin was kind of pointing towards that. We don't have to talk about that right now. Final thing here, that swing situation is also happening at the end and like that solo section. And that's why it's so groovy, is because it's swinging and it's swinging really fast. I mean, if you think about it, very fast swing with a solo on top, that's bebop music. And they're using like a blues scale, right? It's a slight references, and I don't know if all of them were intentional, but Daisuke seems to be like a person that like really thinks out his references. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was just trying to think and like grab like different elements of like traditional American music to create this perfect theme for this like very American character, right? So let's listen to it one more time. We'll point out a couple of things. The synth riff is just like godlike. Well, I mean, and it's a guitar riff too, but so notice the quarter notes on the kick, right? And the guitar doubles the riff, right? And when the drums come back, they're just playing quarter notes. They're still quarter notes, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously, when they do the fills, they like kind of like develop it a little bit more. And then you reinforce those quarter notes with 3 basses. Boom, boom, boom. It's not a big deal. There's so many things that you could argue in this song. Here's the swing groove, right? We hear the swinging. These chords are also coming from the blues scale, right? So, and then here, same deal. So the swing is less stated in the chorus, but they still have those quarter notes. And again, they have those chord progressions that feel very American. Think Bon Jovi, Wanted Dead or Alive, right? Like that sort of sound, which is that's one behemoth swing. Yeah, I love that. Think about those songs that kind of feel like they're both major and minor, right? Kind of have a little bit of like a rugged sound because of it, right? I love this riff. So simple, but like so effective in doing what it needs to do. And like referencing American music in such a like a clean, very simple way. I love it. Second verse development is great, right? Because you just do the same quarter notes, but with guitar. And then the singer, I think that's Naoki. I'm not sure. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but he's just getting a little bit louder about it, right? I do wish this like second half of the verse, since they developed the quiet part, I wish they had developed the loud part as well. What a great song. It truly is a very good song. And I think it just like really works very effectively in like Daisuke's mission to like portray an American character. I think honestly for a person that's like, you know, not American, I think they did a really good job at like doing the right references and doing them in like a classy way, right? In a way that isn't just like, okay, let me just play a blues, right? Rather, let me reference the things that blues and American music does so that it feels like bluesy without it being a blues. It's genius. It's really well done. I feel like it's one of those things when you like point out that it like is referencing the blues, and everything suddenly feels very bluesy about it. And this solo section is just godlike, right? And then we're back to that riff. I love that there's no transition, that they just drop it. Because it's like that strong that you don't even need to like roll a red carpet for it. Just like go and start swinging it again. And then go straight to the chorus. Very clever song. Notice how they're doing a lot of triplets in the chorus too. They reharmonize at the end here to make it more dramatic, but those triplets are also referencing swing music, right? So yeah, again, it's just a bunch of like little references that are done very classily and they're done very like elegantly. They make it work. They make it so that Daisuke does create a very American sounding thing without it like telling you in your face that it's like referencing American music. I think it's like very well done. Honestly, if I was going to give like my final thoughts on the song, I would say it's one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack so far. I think it's one of the most interesting in terms of like feeling like the character and in terms of like having a very overt attempt to feel like the character. It's just a very strong composition in terms of like reference. You know, looking through all the comments of like the tier list and all the stuff that like all of you were telling me about like how this song references that song and how, I don't know, all the interactions that happen within the Guilty Gear soundtrack, that just kind of like reinforces the idea like Daisuke, outside of being a very bold, very like out there composer, is also a person that is very attentive to reference, is very attentive to like theme and to like creating these sort of things that like that fit within a context, right? And I applaud him for that because I think he did a very good job with this one. I think it's just I don't know, it's a fantastically done song. I think The Kiss of Death is one of my favorite songs of the soundtrack. I think that if I was gonna put it on the tier list, I might even have like some edits for the tier list if I were to like sit down and think about it now that I've listened to the songs more. But if I was gonna put it somewhere on the tier list, I would probably put it in A or high B. I think it's a very strong song that you have to like kind of close read into a little bit to like appreciate what Daisuke does. And hey, mind you, I think that like all the songs probably have an element of that, right? Whether I like them or not. I think Daisuke just does that. He leaves little breadcrumbs and like breadcrumb trails and like treasure hunts like inside of his songs for you to like figure it out and like kind of enjoy it more. If you like the song normally, then you like it. But then if you spend the time to kind of analyze it and understand it a little bit better, then you get something valuable out of it, which I think is like the mark of a really good composer. I think that's about everything I have to say about it. I did talk for a very long time about this song, but I like it a lot. And I think that it's doing something very clever. And I wanted to make sure that like the references to American music were like very clear, right? So hopefully the tiny music lesson inside of the like music theory analysis wasn't unwarranted. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for everyone that has been subscribing and that's been like liking the videos and stuff. I feel y'all support and it feels really cool. And I will see y'all next time. Take care.